Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, February 13th. Derek and Riper, Eno Saris, Trevor May, all here with you on this episode. We have a few late signings as spring training gets underway. Alex Bregman has a new home. He heads to Boston. Nick Pivetta heads to San Diego. It sounds like Anthony Rendon is done for 2025 and probably beyond that, so we'll dig into that. Some big picture stuff too. Eno had a Stuff Plus update that was released last week. We're going to dig into the implications of that, and we're going to talk about where teams can try to find differentiation points in strategy as things like Stuff Plus models become more prevalent in the game. Trevor, how you doing? Good to see you.
I am good. Thanks for asking. Everything is great over here. It's good to be back. I'm excited to get back rolling with Rates and Barrels every single week. I'm excited. Let's do it.
Glad to have you back again this season. And Eno, what's going on with you, man?
Nothing. Got to come up with my speech for Moneyball tonight. I'm introducing Moneyball on campus, on Stanford campus tonight, if there's any Stanford listeners. So we'll be at Green Library at 7 o'clock. Got to do a little speech.
That's awesome, man. Well, let's get started with the news. Alex Bregman signs a 3-year, $120 million deal with the Red Sox. Nice big AAV, 2 opt-outs built in. So this could turn into a 1-year deal. I think Eno made his feelings known about it pretty quickly on Blue Sky last night. And the weird thing for me here, Trevor, Alex Bregman's going to play second base potentially for the Red Sox, and so much of his value comes from the defense he brings at third. And when you think about the way the Red Sox are built, Rafael Devers is not a good defensive third baseman. They have some prospects coming up, Christian Campbell being a guy we could probably see a lot of throughout 2025. It seems like an odd fit if they actually go through with the second base plan. So how do you think the pieces are actually going to fit once we move through spring training and get to the point where we reach opening day?
Well, I think the big sticking point here is Yoshida. All right, he's in that DH spot. They don't really know where to put him or what to do with him at this moment. They're kind of stuck with 3 more years on the contract. So I think that's probably an active conversation happening. That's something they're like, hey, if we move this guy, we can bring up, we can put Bregman at third. We can put Devers DH in, and we can bring up Campbell or whoever it is to play second base. And we have people where they're supposed to be with Tristan Casas being able to hold down first. I think even lineup wise, that's a solid choice. And I think that's probably the long term plan. That would be my guess. As in terms of like when you're kind of stuck with, Devers is not a great, defensive third baseman, but he's most likely worse at every other position. Besides hitting only. But they can't do that right now. So it's kind of like hey, it's kind of like take the best guy available right now, and then we'll figure it out as we go. And I think Bregman will be a great second baseman right out the gate. I think that even his skill set, right, lines up to be pretty good for that. He was a shortstop in college. Anyone who has coached him or played with him for any length of time would not be surprised if he could play every place in the field. He's just a pretty good natural defender. So I don't think he's going to be a liability over there, especially if Story's healthy. That's not a bad 1-2 punch there up the middle with some veteran guys who can do some things with their gloves. So, it's not the worst thing that could possibly happen, but it does seem weird that you're going to give a guy $40 million a year for 3 years to switch positions. That is usually a no-no, but it looks like the Red Sox are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place a little bit with these decisions. And it's just like, where do you want to take the risk at? And I think that at the end of the day, Yoshida is the spinach stuck in the Red Sox teeth.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe Yoshida right now. How about Bregman as a hitter? I think you have some concerns about the bat. He did land in another very hitter-friendly environment. I wonder if some of the home run power we've seen in the past starts to turn to doubles off the monster. That could be, one sort of tweak to some of the output we get from Bregman. But you noticed that pitchers were challenging him more in the zone last year too. So what do you think the Red Sox are getting at the plate?
Yeah, I do think this is a good situation for him. In terms of being a right-hander in Fenway, it is not actually a place that creates homers necessarily, a 98 part factor for righties, but it is the best place in baseball to hit doubles and triples because of that big old wall. I think defensively, second and third base are thought statistically to be kind of interchangeable. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily true when you're playing on the diamond, and I'd be interested to hear from Trevor if he thinks of second baseman and third baseman as like physically different. We've seen sort of third baseman bigger. I don't know, second baseman kind of smaller guys. The arm obviously is a difference, but if you're going from third to second, do you think of anything where a third baseman might not be able to play second? Sometimes some of them are kind of like stocky and can't move as much. Does that?
It's range. It's just range. It just comes down to like you got to be able to go get that soft bouncer up the middle, go get the thing deep in the 4-hole.
You don't have a line helping you anymore.
Yeah, you don't have a line helping you. And third base generally, it's called the hot corner on purpose. It's generally like pure glove, your ability to control your glove and knock balls down and get it in the web and stuff. Those are the things that third basemen do really well. And then I think the arm usually plays into that, but I'm not worried about it. He's got his arm's fine.
Well, he's also going to the closer place.
And he's going to the closer place. So it comes down to like, how's his range going to translate? How much side lateral movement does he, still have, because he's been playing for a while now. So that's what it comes down to. But even then, even with the shading and stuff, like a lot of those deep up the middle stuff is kind of the shortstops play anyway. So
they'll cross over the bag even with the rules today.
Exactly. Yeah. So but that's the biggest thing. It's like, here's a prime example. We had Luis Arias in Minnesota for a while. That just was never seen as a long-term option just because his range was his bad knees didn't run really well and his arm was fine. Like, it was not the problem. He just couldn't get side to side to knock balls down. It was just they were getting in the outfield and diving wasn't his thing. So it's like, if you can't do either one of those things, you just got to be able to knock more balls down in a wider range. And he wasn't able to do that. So that's why it wasn't an option. But I think that Bregman has much more skill in that area. Will translate. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if he's like, not only does he have fine range, it's like good range. Like he's got up there. He becomes one of the better second baseman options. So
I think like overall it'll be fine, but you're right. The concern for me is the batted ball velocities and just the umph with the bat. And you tease this a little bit, but just from a barrel standpoint, career 5.7. He's never really been a barreler. His max CV, which is tied to bat speed, 109 for his career. It was 109 last year, so he's maintaining that bat speed, but that's not top end bat speed. That's mediocre, actually. And what he's done a lot of, and we talked about on the show, is pull fly balls into the Crawford boxes. Now he has the Green Monster, so it might still be fine for him in terms of fitting his approach to the park. But one thing that goes beyond like what we see from his results is how pitchers are pitching him. And so I had this tidbit a little while back that he saw a big increase in zone percentage, and his zone percentage year over year from 23 to 24 went from 49.9% to 53.6%. 53.6 is the most since his rookie year. And rookies, what do pitchers normally do to rookies? Kind of fill up the zone and show me you can do something, especially for a guy that has a reputation coming up of not reaching, not chasing, of walking, So, you like to walk? Well, let me see if you can actually hit for power. And he hit for power and the zone rate went down. And this is something that we've seen from this angle is that if you look at the distance that a pitch goes from the heart of the zone on average for a player, you can predict breakouts because pitchers know before the results are almost always there. Like they know from scouting reports. They know from like, oh, he smoked that ball last week. Like they know, okay, I need to be a little bit more careful with this guy. I saw this highlight or that my coach told me he's been hitting for power, right? Like, and so as they kind of get away from the heart of the zone, you start to see like Chris Davis did not have a great sense of the zone. Chris Davis with a C. And he didn't have a great sense of the zone. But what he did was he smacked the crap out of the ball to the point where pitchers were like, oh, man, I need to live in the shadow zone. Like, I cannot throw him down the middle. And so he walked for a while, and then he stopped hitting for power, and his walk rate disappeared. And so what I'm worried about with Bregman is that they're filling up the zone again. Why are they filling up the zone again? They don't fear him. And I looked at this and I saw that that there were 33 regulars that were older than 30 that saw as big of a zone increase as Bregman saw. Of that 30, 6 never played again. Like, never were a regular again. So that's just, you say, take 6 of those guys, and the league had figured them out. They were done. They were over the hill. They were done. So 6 are gone. The other 27 that still played saw a 3-point drop in their WRC plus, and 8 of them dropped more than 20 points. So basically, for almost half of the sample, they were done as regular big contributors after they saw this kind of an increase in zone percentage. Now, of course, some of the guys that saw this and shrugged it off were like Manny Machado. They filled up the zone when he was hurt, and then he came back. He's like, "Leo, I'm not hurt anymore," and they were like, "Okay." Like, there, maybe Bregman has played through injury before, and he had this gross thing on his hand that he had to take, like, that he had to, like. That was gross. So we talked about for a while.
I'm laughing because you bring that up all the time. Yeah, that would make hitting more difficult.
But he played through that. So maybe there was something he was playing through, and he's going to be fine next year, and we'll see that zone percentage go the other direction. Maybe he will get on a Manny Machado type trajectory. But my bet is that he never opts out of this deal. My bet is he stays there. This is that he is kind of like a 3-win guy for the next 3 years, which is above average, but not someone that would opt out of a $40 million deal.
For what it's worth, if he's about a 3-win player over the life of the deal, maybe gets up to 10 wins over 3 years, they kind of break even. A win costs, $12 million now in free agency anyway? And there's a chance
looking at it, it's
anymore.
11. It's 11.
Okay, it's close.
And if you think he's a 4-win player next year, and some of the projections say that, then they pay about $11 million per win for over these 3 years. Some of the projections say he's a 3.4, 3.5 win player. Then you're paying $13 million per win. So that's my point, is that, like, either he's paid okay for what he's doing and he's not necessarily going to get more by opting out, or he's overpaid and he sticks into it. So overpaid according to the market. But I think, for the Red Sox, this is fine. It's a 3-year deal. It's not going to block Campbell long term. It's not going to block Roman Anthony. Roman Anthony can push Wilyer Abreu out of the way, or maybe they trade Yoshida. I don't think they trade Casas because he's pretty exciting as a young player, but maybe they make a trade. But Roman Anthony can push his way to the big leagues in this situation. And Christian Campbell, the big thing is Trevor Story's not going to be short for a long time. And I don't think Christian Campbell can play short, but then they're going to have to move things around. Maybe Marcelo Meyer comes up, maybe David Hamilton plays over there. Whatever it is, there's still room for the big prospects to make it. It's just they're not depending on it.
I think the injury history of Trevor Story also is something that has to come into the equation as far as looking at this group of prospects and saying, hey, Christian Campbell's not that blocked. They have some options as far as moving other guys around. It's all more fluid than it looks beyond the Yoshida problem. I like this move for the Red Sox more than Eno does. I think Bregman is still a 4 to 5 win player. And I think I would look at the first half versus the second half and wonder if he was playing through an injury last year. You just don't always get the report. Sometimes guys don't talk about it, and you're just left to look at the numbers and make an assumption like that. He's still going to be just 31 at the end of this month. I think this ends up being just fine for Boston. I don't think it's an Anthony Rendon situation. We'll get to Rendon here in just a couple of minutes. Nick Pivetta on the move. He lands with the Padres. You suggested this was a possibility during our NL West team previews. The shape of the contract, highly unusual given the financial constraints the Padres are facing right now. Nick Pivetta is going to pitch for a $1 million salary in 2025, getting a bit more money in the following 3 years of the deal. Add it all up, it's going to be 4 for 55 if he stays on that deal the entire time. 2 opt-outs, 26 and 27. So a lot on the detail side of this one, but definitely a move that makes that Padres rotation necessarily better, right? We talked about the Joe Musgrove injury, and they hadn't really done anything throughout the entire offseason to backfill for that. So Trevor, from your perspective, Nick Pivetta for the first time gets to call a pitcher-friendly ballpark home. Are we going to see the absolute best versions of him that we've seen at this point in his big league career in San Diego.
Yeah, I like this a lot. I think he's got one of those one of the best riding fastballs in the league. He's got great breaking ball. He fits into that rotation. They need a guy with veteran status, like some veteran experience. Also, this contract's really interesting too because it's very clear that at some point the negotiation probably wasn't going to move forward unless that front part happened because there's so much going on in San Diego with trying to shed payroll and figure out, if they want to, how they want to go and compete and with the ownership and their old legal things going on, that he's like, okay, let's just kick the can. Let's just kick the ball down the road a little bit. We'll deal with that, cross that bridge when we get to it. And we'll make all the big payouts or the majority of this money paid out after those opt-outs. So that way there's still a way to make an adjustment if things work out for him or vice versa. So it is a team friendly situation. Taking a $1 million salary is crazy. That first paycheck, he's going to look and it's going to be jarring. But I'm interested to know if he gets to $3 million before the season or if he's getting it after the season. Because then you're like, I don't get paid for this until next offseason. That would stink. I wouldn't like that. But at the same time, like it's just all kind of nominal. So, but in terms of grabbing a guy with what was left out there in terms of starting pitching, he was one of those guys at the top of the list still left going, and they were able to go snag him. And I think that it makes them a little bit better, and they feel a little bit better about being fans of that team where they did a couple things in order to keep them competitive as opposed to just like packing it in and just going full Mariners and trying to gaslight you and tell you that we're good still, even though we didn't do anything.
Yeah. I think if you're Nick Pivetta, you fire your agent.
He didn't have Boris, did he? He's like the only guy in the whole free agent, not with Boris.
It's CAA. I don't know who the head honcho is at CAA, but I think I would fire them because he had a $20 million qualifying offer and he went from 20 to $4 million for this year. I think he'll get the 3 first, probably when he's at home somewhere. So he doesn't have to pay California taxes. And he does get up to kind of close to a $20 million salary the rest of the way. So, maybe he wanted that long-term commitment and he got that. So that's good for him in that way. He's a guy who got hurt in the model because when we put in arm slot, like his arm slot, 56 degrees is pretty high.
Yeah.
And what you see is that hitters kind of expect that he's good like 19-inch, 20-inch ride on his fastball. But if you look at pitchers that have his arm slot, you'd expect actually sort of like 17 to 18 inches of ride. So ride over expected versus his arm slot is only 2 inches. So you would look at, league average is IVB is 16 inches. He has 4 or 5 inches of ride on most guys. Yeah, but most guys aren't throwing from where he is. And as soon as the hitter sees, he's an up top guy, they start, their mental math, like their machines start being like, okay, ride, got to hit the top of this ball. And so what we found in the remake of the model, it still has good stuff. It's still 2 inches over average, but it's 2 inches over average versus like sort of 4 inches over average. Another thing we found when we looked at like expected outcomes is that he does have a homer problem, and you can look at just as his history and understand that. But and he gives up homers to lefties and righties. And so I wanted to say, the StatCast Park factors for Padres say that against left-handed hitters, he's going to really suppress homers and just repress offense in general. But he's given up homers to righties, so it's amazing. The Padres' Park factor for home runs against righties is 7th best, for hitters over the last 3 years. So I think he'll still probably have a bit of a home run problem. Maybe it'll be a little bit better than usual. I mean, he gave up almost 2 homers per 9 last year. He's given up 1.5 for his career. I think the big thing for him is just to limit the walk rate, and that's what he did last year. If he can limit the walk rate, and he can do that with his hard slider that he's been throwing more than his curve, if he can limit the walk rates, then the home runs are solo jobs. Mm-hmm. And, beyond this, just for the Padres, I think they're going to keep Dylan Cease and Michael King because, Preller has been a very much a let's make the team better for this year guy. And I think he probably looked around and saw the trades that were being offered to him for Cease and King and couldn't figure out how to make his team better by trading Cease and King. And instead, he goes out and for a combined $5 million in salary this year, he finds a way to paper over left field, paper over the fourth starter and the fifth starter. Kyle Hart is coming back for $1 million from the KBO to be their fifth starter. I think he might be able to be like a little bit like an Eric Fetty type because he learned a sweeper, he has a sinker, and he started throwing his changeup a lot more in Korea. So I think, Eric Fetty type who doesn't throw the fastball that much, throws a sweeper a ton, and is okay given the fact that he doesn't have a great fastball. I think that's what Kyle Hart can be. So, you go get Nick Pivetta, who's going to strike everybody out, maybe give up some homers. You get an Eric Fetty type for your fifth starter. You get, Connor Joe and Jason Hayward in the outfield. And all these guys are playing for you for $5 million combined salary this season. Why do you have to trade Season King now? I think he did a really good job. I don't like him as a leader. I think he's gotten into some trouble with the rules in multiple places, and he's kind of a maverick. But I think this is pretty good roster building. You talk about roster spackle, like he went and found he spackled all the holes that his roster had, and he did it for pretty cheap.
Yeah, got to give him credit because I didn't think there was going to be a solution like this, a much more creative deal, and he found someone willing to take it in Nick Pivetta, right? I mean, $55 million guaranteed, even if it's oddly shaped, is still $55 million guaranteed. And because Pivetta hasn't had like workhorse durability and he hasn't shown a great walk rate prior to 2024, and you factor in all the homers was talking about, there are enough skills and physical questions there where I think that was probably a limiting factor in what his market looked like looking around in free agency this offseason. One more news item to get to. It's probably the end for Anthony Rendon. He's going to have hip surgery, out for 2025. Sam Blum wrote about this for The Athletic. And I mean, you're going to look at this deal for years, 7 years, $245 million, and it's going to come up as maybe the worst contract in baseball history. Like, I think that is the way people are going to remember Anthony Rendon. I don't think he's done himself a lot of favors in recent years with the way he's gone about this. Like, being hurt sucks. Like, there's no way around that, right? And I think when you are honest, the way Anthony Rendon has been, you will also piss people off. The truth will upset people when it's not what they want to hear. So you look at the full scope of this and you say, oh, this is a disaster. And it is. It's another reminder, though, that the salary structure in baseball is awful. And until you have a system where players reach free agency faster and get into arbitration faster, you're always going to look at the mega deals that don't work out. Like the fan lens is going to be like, oh, this is awful. Instead of looking back at the years he spent in Washington and saying, well, he was underpaid. He earned the contract that he got from the Angels while he was with the Nationals, right? If the money was just flipped, we'd have no problem with anything that happened with Anthony Rendon with the Angels.
Yeah, because he'd be getting 700,000 or whatever this year.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it makes sense. But it is the nature of the base. Like you're paying it's back pay. That's why a lot of these contracts sometimes are also sometimes they're backloaded as well for the option to make decisions later and avoid paying that money out with trades and things of that nature. That's how it's always been put together, and that's the nature of our free agency. That's why there's so much control over players for so long. But this is just what's going to happen. I understand as a fan of the team, you're like, I don't care what he did with the Nationals, and that makes sense. It's just kind of there's no other way to divvy this stuff up with the way that things put together. Now, if you want to go do a salary cap and all that kind of stuff, it does fix that problem a little bit. But you got to get rid of some bye-bye arbitration. You're going to see your rookie guys leave in 3 years instead of having them for 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah, that's the only way that players would ever give up a salary cap.
The only way,
like massive change to how long you have them. And
I hope Mr. Rubenstein's listening to the show right now. Like that's
the only way they would do it. If they got in the NBA, you get like a pretty huge contract. Yeah. Relative. Like your rookie contract is pretty big.
It is. Yeah.
So that would be how that would be baseball would be too. Is like there's to be something where like you just immediately start earning money.
Yeah. So it would be there'd be issues in its own right. but that's the way it works. And we're seeing, Jacoby Ellsbury 2.0, like just go down to Florida or go down to Arizona and until the clock runs out, and then you can go home. Like that. That's probably going to be one of the things. Anthony doesn't seem super worried about it. I am a little bit worried that LA is counting on maybe the only other guy who gets hurt just as much in Yohan Moncada to play third. So my guess is by May.
And other people have also wondered about his motor, dude.
Yeah. So
people wondered about Moncada's motor, and it's like, okay, we just replaced maybe another low motor guy with another low motor guy.
Yeah,
good job.
They're counting on both. So, but yeah, I injuries suck. Everyone's career is their own. But it stinks. But in terms of it being one of the worst contracts ever, it's up there because there are 10 pitchers in the history of Major League Baseball who have more home runs than he's had as an Angel. With Carlos Zambrano is probably the most recent, with 24. He's only got 22 total homers on the career. But we can also look, if we're going to talk about injuries, Strasburg's got to be up there. That one,
yeah. But it's a little bit more like expected with pitchers, where you're like, oh yeah. You signed him.
Something breaks and there's no coming back.
Yeah. It's like with Rendon. I mean, maybe that's what it. I mean, this is another hip surgery. I think this is not his first. I think.
Yeah.
Maybe he's just hips have just been. Maybe just kind of broke, and that's what happened. But I do think there's a little bit of interesting thing here when it comes to how you kind of deal with the media, and like I know that you were already had one foot in the media. You were almost like Draymond Greening it, where like you had like
good comp.
Exactly like Draymond on the field
temperament. Yeah.
But like you had one foot in sort of the media, and we had podcasting and streaming. So I don't know if your personal experience is exactly the right one, but I do think that I wish that players understood how there's going to be a second career for them. And if they manage their interactions with the media and think about it and are intentional about it, that they have more opportunities waiting for them afterwards if they do that. Because I think they see the media as the enemy and as someone who can do nothing for me. They can only screw me up. They can only take something I say and blow it up and make me look like an idiot or whatever it is. And if they saw them as, and I don't like being transactional, but this is, you're like, everyone's working. If they saw them more as someone that they could be transactional with and be like, oh, I can get something out of them. I can get better coverage if I'm nicer to them. I can prove to people that I'm good on camera. They'll start putting me on the post game and the pregame, more often. If I'm the guy who speaks well and knows and gives them something, gives them a little bit, gives them something, because there's a lot of either the Derek Jeter, Mike Trout, which is just like, I'm going to give you nothing. I'll be nice to you and smile to you and say some words, and you will have nothing. You'll go back and be like, God, what am I supposed to do with this? But I think the best ones end up being, the guys who, like a David Ortiz, like it's no surprise to me at all that he's on the Fox pregame, because he would be honest with you and he would tell you things, and he would see you as a human being, and he would tell you things that you knew you could use. And you knew that you would treat him better. Like, why does David Ortiz get a pass for some of the things that happened in the testing and in that, why is he just in the hall? Like, you know what I mean? Like, probably some part of it was that he saw that, and I don't think he was necessarily transactional. He was just kind of a nice guy that like just did it because that's how he was. But, A-Rod, he's even skirted some stuff and gotten on TV because he was a little bit more intentional and gave people some little bits and, so anyway, I would just say that, I like that he was honest. And if he'd taken that honesty and just put a little bit of thought into it, he might actually have gotten better coverage. Like literally, he could have said some of the same things with just a slight different bend to it if he thought about it, Instead, I think there's other players that are going to see what happened to him and be like, see, I don't want to talk to you. Look what you did to my boy Rendon.
Yeah.
And I would argue, that honesty was self-inflicted, right? You can be honest without saying things that are bad for yourself. I think that was the lesson Anthony Rendon just didn't learn.
It's like an extra word or two. Like if you just say, sometimes it's hard to be out there.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, I don't care about, you know what I mean? Like even sometimes it's hard to care about baseball as opposed to I don't care about baseball. You know what I mean? Like there's just like a few words and like like thinking about how this would look in print, you know, and it can do wonders for you. And writers can be an asset for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think we could pretty safely say this is likely the end of the road for Anthony Rendon as a player. Doesn't seem like we're going to see him anywhere. That contract runs out after 2026.
This is not on the rundown, but this one I feel like a little bit sad about. Avisel Garcia is having shoulder surgery, and I think it might be a similar situation. I don't know if there'll be an opportunity waiting for him when he comes back because of it just how poorly it went in Florida. But I just remember him as a beast. I don't know how many times you faced him, but he hit the ball super hard, ran super hard, had a big arm. Maybe didn't have like the very best sort of soft baseball skills in terms of running the best routes or like having the best approach at the plate. Did you like pitching to him, or was he kind of scary?
There was a time where he was a problem, but I overall had pretty good success. I strikeout. I could go get a strikeout, get him to chase, especially when it was like I think with the Brewers. That was a swing and miss time. He was a freak athlete. Like he was a monster of a human being, like the size of Miggy Cabrera, but he ran. He was the fastest guy in the team.
Yeah.
I know that was kind of the comp because he came up, Venezuelan guy. They have kind of the same.
They kind of look like each other.
Yeah, but he was just like athletically. You were just like, dude, like he's running. He doesn't look like he's running that fast, but he's just safe. And you're like, oh, he's a monster. I just think he got hit he had a couple seasons that were just thrown away because of some nagging injuries that he just couldn't kind of stay on the field for, and it was a little bit sad to see. But we never got the vibe that he like pulled the shoot. Right, it was never a shoot pull. It was just like unfortunate, like knee thing, hip thing. You know, he's just so big. Like it's
almost like a Trout. Like.
Yeah, it all made sense. Safety. I'm like, you're a 6'5" dude that runs like a deer. Like, your joints are going to take some pounding, and you're going to steal a lot, and you just can't be that dynamic in baseball. So, see, also, Byron Buxton, like, almost too athletic for your own good on a baseball field. There's too many things to run into.
There were even times where he was playing center field. I remember seeing that in Milwaukee. It's like, this guy can play center. Like,
I need a cannon.
Yeah, cannon.
Yeah,
pretty fun guy, mic'd up on the field a few times too.
He's never going to like, I don't even think he'll get on the ballot for the Hall of Fame. Maybe he will because of 10 years, but I don't think he'll make it past one. I mean, he had 8 wins for his career, 140 homers, was below average with the bat, which surprises me. But he's one of those ones that I will remember. This is a prime remember some guys guy. Definitely a guy who played and made his space on the field, and people know who he was. But
a tooled up high variance player. It's just like he's the epitome of that. But
almost like in fantasy, almost like a every other year sleeper on everybody's list. Yeah,
because some of the process stuff under the underlying numbers, the quality of contact was there at times. Double-digit barrel rates, the ability to run a little bit. It would show up in fits and spurts, and just couldn't do it year over year over year. That was the frustrating thing about Avisel Garcia. Let's talk about the new Stuff Plus model. And I want to just pull back because we have new listeners that join the show all the time. And kind of just to throw this out there, what is Stuff Plus? What is your 60-second explanation for Stuff Plus for anyone who's never heard of it before? Why should people care about a pitching model?
Well, I mean, the easiest thing is it's just grading pitches based on their physical characteristics. So you use release point, spin direction, now acceleration instead of movement. So just think about the ball moving through space, and you judge pitches based on just their physical characteristics, what we call stuff. So I think it's named appropriately, and it's actually, when I say it that way, I think it makes a lot of sense. When you start getting into how the model works and stuff, yes, it is maybe an advanced, quote unquote, advanced analytic, but I think it's like something that's born of scouts and born of pitcher questions. The first question that ever spawned Stuff Plus for Driveline was Brandon Bailey. The Astros told him, you have to throw either your curveball with more movement or your slider harder or something. It was like he had a choice. And he's like, which one? Which one will make me better? And so Driveline was like, we're going to create Stuff Plus so we can answer that question for you. And so I think it's a great player development tool, a great scouting tool. It can be used to assess pitchers' performance because you're looking at just how good their stuff is without any reaction to how it actually plays on the field.
And Trevor, one kind of follow-up question I have for you is, from the introduction of these models came out kind of tail end of your career, just from the last few years of your career when this was new versus today, how prevalent has this become? Like how many guys care about this on a player level?
A lot of players, I think, care about a lot of the elements that go into Stuff Plus, with maybe not seeing it as using the term Stuff Plus. I think that's still a little bit more of a, in the weeds kind of situation for them. And honestly, it might be too much to factor in, but there's tons of players, the vast majority of players now are paying attention to how their stuff moves. The terminology I use a lot when I'm referring to a pitch with the game context removed is in a vacuum, it's X, Y, or Z. Like in a vacuum, this is a great pitch. And I think of this as an evaluation tool, almost like the little hands on a compass. It points you in a direction, whether or not someone should stop throwing this thing, or maybe there's development to happen in that thing, or maybe there's
how to make it better.
How do you make it better?
How do you make your curveball better?
That might be naturally better.
Yeah, how do you make your curveball better if you don't know what a good curveball is by itself? Then all you can do is be like, Kershaw throws his like this, so I'm going to try to throw it like Kershaw. TV. But you may not look like anything like Kershaw. You may not have the same release or anything. So
exactly,
yeah, this is part of the framework that's mostly adopted by everybody, right?
Yeah, it's comparative too. You can then see other guys with their things, and then start to break down what they do and how you can mimic it. It points you in directions for making yourself better, and it also, as an evaluator, and I just kind of thought about this as well. The whole idea of you're evaluating a D2 college guy or like a smaller D1 school, and you're trying to determine how good they are based on who they're playing against, or a high school kid. You're like, these kids can't hit him. Like, he throws hard. You don't know what's making it. But if you Stuff Plus it, like, oh, it moves this way. We know, like, he's been on a TrackMan before. We can do these things. Perfect Game has everyone on TrackMans now, right? So you can actually get everyone's metrics and come up with a Stuff Plus number for 18-year-old kids, where now that projectability, you're like projecting that they have a good pitch. Like, you can see metrically, it's already at a big league level. It's already moving this much, or it already is this hard. And that's going to translate in a vacuum. Now, learning to pitch is how you then layer in the context. But the way I try to explain why it's important, and I just tried to explain this and on my own Mayday show too, is just like, what the hell is Stuff Plus? It's you want to point yourself in a direction to this pitch has the most context in which it might give you the result you want. And the higher the number, the more context in which it works. And so that way you can then layer in the context, and you're more confident in that pitch being successful. And like teams like the Rays and teams like the Astros and the Astros, prime example, Kikuchi, hey, throw your riding four seam, throw your slider. Stuff Plus.
Those are your best pitches, yeah.
Just start your two best pitches. And he became a 2-pitch pitcher and was nails.
But they also had a little bit, that's funny. The Kikuchi one is they also had a little bit of what you were talking about. The sort of added context was throw that slider outside to righties as opposed to inside. Yeah. Because of how that kind of shape functions there. So they're if you could put an 89 mile an hour poo-poo sinker with poor shape. If you could put it just on that tiny little outside corner, just like if you could do what Leo Mazzoni said that they should do in Atlanta, and you could do it over and over again, you could be great.
Greg Maddux.
Yeah, you're talking about the Maddux down and away fastballs.
Yeah.
And he knew exactly how to do it. He knew how to do it every time, and that's what made him.
But the problem is a lot of those leak out and aren't our balls. A lot of those leak over the middle of the plate, and so that's what you're sort of talking about. Is like, if you had a high stuff pitch when you miss and you don't have that other contextual stuff in the correct place, you do better.
Yeah.
Like if you
the chances it works out for you are higher.
If Felix Bautista misses middle, it's going to be very different outcome than if Eric Fetty misses middle.
Yeah.
Right. We've talked about this with Spencer Strider. Leaning heavily on those two pitches. I think at one point we looked it up, and he was among the league leaders in pitches in the middle part of the zone. But guess what? That fastball and that slider can get away with that, because it's like elite closer stuff from a starter. Like that's how good those pitches are. So the interesting thing I saw, so you have a write-up on The Athletic about some of the changes that were made to the model, and the league is almost saturated with Stuff Plus. 28 out of 30 teams is the estimate number of teams using it. But what's really interesting to me is like, yeah, okay, so everyone has a model. They're kind of similar in terms of what they're looking at, of course. So you get similar results, but you still have different interpretations of how to apply it. So I don't think we've moved so far down the road where teams have kind of a consistent agreement, and we haven't completely hit this point of the model being no longer being an advantage, right? It's less of an advantage than it was previously, but there are still ways to get more out of it than some of the other teams that are using this information.
Yeah, there's still some subtleties to how you did it. When we redid our model, we broke it up. It used to be one model, which is amazing. It's kind of crazy. You used to be able to put in pitch shape and velocity, and it would predict swings, takes, called strikes, balls, homers. And that's a crazy idea if you think about it, because there's a swing take decision, there's the ball in play, So what we did was we made a swing model, we made a take model. The take model is an ump model, right? Once you take the ball, then it's an ump. It's like an ump and catcher framing model, right? So we split it up into different things. That made it a lot better. There's also we get more. There's still like more stats we can throw in. So teams will be able to identify biomechanical markers that they can put in, and they can start to put in where your elbow is when it's coming through, how much layback you have on your forearm when you're coming through, stuff like that we don't have access to. For example, in this new model, we put in arm slot because Savant came out with an arm slot metric. Before, we just had a release point, but a release point, there are a million different ways to get to one release point. There's different ways. You could be tall and sidearm. You could be short and over the top and have the same release point. And so arm slot is an angle, a shoulder angle, and that improved our model. So there are still ways to improve the model going forward. And then I think one of the biggest ways is just how you implement it. And can you put it into a good projection system so that you can project pitchers better and acquire the best pitchers? Because could you do something where you're like, this is his current Stuff Plus, but we have a projected Stuff Plus given the changes we might make to his mechanics or his pitches. And given his projected Stuff Plus, this is his Stuff Plus if he joins the Dodgers. I know people are doing that. Then you can also do things where you're like, this is his Stuff Plus if he's facing a guy with a scoopy swing, and this is his Stuff Plus if he's facing a guy with a flat swing. You start doing interactions between batters and pitchers, so you can be like, hey, build a better bullpen. We have a bunch of guys who can get the flat swings, a bunch of guys who get the scoopy swings, that sort of deal. Or you want to acquire a pitcher who can do both. You can get the flat guys out with this, and you get the scoopy guy out with this. Especially if you're signing a 10-year deal, you want to be like, no, I don't want to find out that you can't get anybody out that has a flat swing, and then all of baseball starts to do a flat swing, and then you're screwed. So there's different things you can do with it. And then lastly, I think one of the hugest ways that this is important is implementing, like Kyle Bodie's in my piece about Stuff Plus saying, we made it important for us as an organization. We told our coaches that you're going to be graded on if the stuff grades improve on your pitcher's pitches. And we discovered that there were coaches that moved the needle. And those coaches are now pitching directors for different teams because they were obviously good, but we had a way of measuring our coaches now. That's different than like, oh, your guy struck a bunch of guys out. Well, were they high picks? Were they facing bad guys? What do you mean? Instead, we can be like, oh, no, you took this guy's fastball and made it this much better. That's what a coach is supposed to do. So the teams that are really good with Stuff Plus are like actually just really good at running organizations. They know how to judge their own people. They know how to hire good people. They know what they're looking for. They know how to implement an ethos up and down the organization. So I think there's still a lot of ways that you can take a Stuff Plus and say, oh yeah, there are probably 10 teams that have a Stuff Plus and nobody looks at it, nobody cares about it, and nobody in the front office consults it when they're trying to sign a reliever and, that sort of deal. Like the Angels probably have a Stuff Plus. Does it inform their decisions? Do they care about it? Is anyone looking at it? Do they use it in the minor leagues?
Or if you have a team of analysts that think it's important, but you have a group of coaches that are not on the same page, then it doesn't matter. It falls
Troy
flat.
Percival saying nobody. Why do they have these laptops out? Why are their iPads out? Okay.
Why are there laptops
say Stuff Plus in front of Troy?
Yeah. Right. And then you have the challenge of having to have other people in the organization that can bridge the gap. And that's almost impossible in some cases if you don't have a large staff. So then you just end up spending a bunch of money on people that aren't being listened to and acquiring players that are not even reaching their full potential because your coaches can't get them there.
Yeah. And another way you could figure out what the model is good at and what it's bad at and start coaching to what it's bad at, because other teams, for example, the Mets, who have former Driveline employees up and down, and they know Stuff Plus. I'm sure they use it at least in their making their plans. And that's a lot of times. So maybe the pitcher, if I'm talking to Trevor May, I'm not going to tell him about Stuff Plus. I'm going to say, I think your curveball would be better if it was more sideways or if it was more vertical, if you killed the sideways on it. I'm doing that because I looked at the Stuff Plus, and it would have a higher Stuff Plus if it was more vertical and less sideways, right? But I don't have to tell him that's what it's from. But they also discovered that, hey, some stuff models really struggle with multiple fastballs. What do the Mets have? The most pitchers in baseball with multiple fastballs. They teach their relievers multiple fastballs. Everybody in the Mets organization has like multiple fastballs. And so, there are ways to kind of see what the state of the art is and poke holes into it. And even before you fix those holes, coach, find an edge, in those holes.
Yeah, I think that gets to the big question for the end of this episode. In what places are teams looking for edges within models and even beyond that, right? I mean, I think when we were getting ready for this show, Trevor pointed out a massive change. Like, Trevor, there's a problem in basketball that I think is really interesting here. Explain why basketball might be broken.
Well, this is someone coined it like the solved game problem, and it's something that's almost always existed with why different types of games get popular and then kind of phase out. Is human beings tend to, this is really common in video games actually, but human beings tend to find they min-max, they find the most efficient way to play a game and be the best at it. And basketball has a limited way of scoring. So you see here in the top, this is from a game, I think it was from the 99-2000 season. These are the most commonly made shots, or maybe I think might be the whole season. These are like the most commonly made 100 or so, shots. And then below is from a 22-23 season. And these are the most commonly taken shots. I don't know if you noticed a difference, but there is nothing outside the paint or inside a 3-point line, and they got rid of the baseline, which makes a lot of sense. No backboard. I mean, if you just look at it, but this is a prime example of advanced analytics in basketball saying it is not worth taking a shot that isn't these two types of shots, and that's boring. That's what the 3 outcome thing for baseball was, and I think we've made some meaningful rule changes. I don't know how you do it in basketball, but
yeah, just to show the 3 outcomes has gone from 15% in 1900 to 35% in 2020, according to a piece by Mario on Medium. This is a pretty cool. I think this is the same. We're looking at the same chart. It's like the same. It's the same thing.
But I think a lot of that stuff actually, if this extended all the way to 2025, I bet you there's a slight dip. It probably hasn't dipped in a huge way, but I bet you would stop that exponential growth.
Strikeouts are plateauing. Yeah.
Yeah, strikeouts are plateauing, which is a good thing. And there's more than you add in. There's more stolen bases and all this kind of stuff. There's more ways to score, though it's never going to fully go away because they are still the highest value. Just how much more value they create other than other options as that gap has changed. So like in basketball, they have to figure out different ways to score or different ways to penalize doing things or something, or it's just going to keep getting like there's no reason to defend, right? That's why defense has gone away. The athleticism of the league is big too, but you can't defend those 2 shots either. It's really hard. So not only did offense say, hey, let's only take these, the guys who are defensive are like, what's the point of even trying to defend them? Because you're wasting more energy and not really getting any benefit. So let's just stop playing defense really. And that's why there's no defensive specialists outside of like one guy on a team. There's no teams that are like hard-nosed.
Or they have what's called a 3-and-D.
Yeah.
which is the guy who camps out the 3-point line offensively, doesn't use any energy offensively, is just sitting there waiting for the ball to hit threes, and then uses all his energy defensively. But that's born of that shot chart. It's like, oh, you can still give me offensive value by standing over here. And then being a good defender. But yeah, I think if you're basketball, you need to look at rules about fouling, rules about charge taking, rules about, John Hollinger on our site has this idea of like, you actually don't get 3 foul shots for if you're fouled on a 3-point shot. You only get 2. And that would make people more aggressive defensively on 3-point shots. Now, would it lead to more injuries with ankles and landing on people? So there's, but when you're making a game, I was fascinated. You brought up video gaming. My kids are always talking about who's OP. And who's overpowered. So they play a lot of Smash Brothers. They play a little bit of Tekken. And my wife just yesterday was talking about how she didn't like how someone was yelling at my son because he used Pikachu. And my younger son was like, yeah, because that Pikachu's OP. I would yell at him too, So like there's this idea that like there are characters that have powers, that make it less fun. And that's why Smash Brothers has to do re-releases and add new characters
and rebalance and
any
character select
turf
game.
A character. If some
right
character is being used too
Rival.
much, they'll track it too. Everyone's using Pikachu. Okay, we need to make.
Oh, there's
Pikachu's
advanced
power
analytics
size.
too. There's win rates. Each they have all this stuff's public knowledge websites. Guys like this picking this character has the highest win rate, and then the developers make adjustments based on the team. Like there's a guy who wins 70% of the games he's in, like a character. He's probably way too strong, and they need to get the balance. They want everyone within like 55 to 45, so everything's viable in different situations.
But that's easier to do.
Rebalancing.
It's easier to do maybe in video gaming.
Every year you just roll it out.
You come out with a new game, and you're just like, hey, but we follow these sports that have been playing for hundreds of years. And, we have another thing here that I think is pretty interesting. These sports used to have different rules changes more often. And in basketball, like, the 3-point line, like, or in football, like forward passing. So Sam Miller wrote a great piece about, he called it Baseball's Meant to Change. His Substack is called Pebble Hunting. And he just pointed out here on this chart that he had, we used to have rule changes like crazy in the 1880s and 1890s. I mean, 20 rule changes a year, or 20 rule changes in the 1880s as a decade. And then we had, in the 1910s had 0, in the 1940s had 0, in the 80s and 90s we had 0. And that's a lot of the growing up time for a lot of the fans now, right? Is the 80s and 90s is how they remember the game, and it didn't change. And so it's not supposed to change. But we're back now to changing a little bit more, and that's been, been annoying to people. But I just wanted to remind people, so baseball started in like the 1830s. So 50 years into the existence of baseball as a sport that was played, these were the rules that started to be, and this is from Sam Miller as well. In 1880, drop third strike rule implemented. Okay, well that's a big deal, but that's not that big a deal. 1882, pitchers allowed to throw sidearm. Wait, they weren't allowed to throw sidearm? 1883, balls required for a walk lowered to 6. 1884, pitchers allowed to throw overhand. Okay, overhand. Well, that's okay, good they allowed that. 1885, one side of the bat could be flat.
Love that one.
1886, stolen bases made official. 1887, batters could no longer tell pitchers where to throw the ball. Hit by pitch rule implemented. Strike zone established. 50 years into baseball, they established the strike zone. So they didn't have a bench until 1889. So you could say, well, this is still a nascent sport. Now we're more of a mature sport. But I think that, and there might be people listening who be like, I don't want baseball to be like a video game that changes all the time. But the solved sport problem is a real one. Like if we have board games that the family no longer plays, because there was one way of winning it, and whoever got that piece or rolled that die at that thing, or you know what I mean? That's why I kind of like games with dice rolling, because it just throws in an element of chance, and it's even if you're using the right strategy, you can lose. I think that's important. I've always really liked backgammon because it's a dice game. So I think that on some level, baseball is doing the right thing in trying these different ones. One rule that I want to get your reaction to, Trevor, made that I thought was fun. A person in a front office told me that so one way now that you could be on the front edge of Stuff Plus research is to do more seam shifted wake. And it's a little surprising that the teams that are doing the most seam shifted wake are not the teams that you'd expect, but they are the teams that need it the most. So I looked at the number of pitches that had the large seam shifted wake, like axis deviation is another way of saying it. And it was Colorado, Oakland, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and the Mets, and the Twins and the Yankees. So these are teams that are that are acquiring players, at least, maybe not developing it, but acquiring players that benefit from seam shifted wake. And I think that it makes a lot of sense for like Colorado to do something like that because they want weak contact, and they need to do something different. They like sinkers and changeups, so it's like, yeah, of course they like seam shifted wake. So the leading edge of seam shifted wake is like using the seams to get certain effects that are hard for the batter to see. The batter sees a slot and he gets a different movement. So my friend in the front office said, what if we paint the ball? Paint the ball with, remember, didn't you have a dot that you were trying to get to spin a certain way to get your sweeper to work? Was it your sweeper?
Sometimes it's like this is the Sears.
JP Sears. Yeah.
JP Sears thing. It's funny. Who told me?
Dot on the ball. He was trying to make the dot so you could see the dot.
They had Kyle, Big Donkey Kyle.
Muller?
Kyle Muller. They had Kyle Muller go home with it, the same ball, to try to get because he had a really loose spinning slider, and they wanted more of the sideways. So he uses this. JP made him a ball, and then he took it home with him to learn it. But
he's saying like if you put that on the ball that you play with,
so hitters can see it.
Hitters can see the spinning dot and be like, oh, this is a sweeper, or whatever, react to it.
Yeah. Do you know what'll happen then? They'll get used to that. That'll become their normal, and then everyone will throw the classics again.
Yeah, right.
And you'll try to figure out how to manipulate that dot.
People will try to manipulate the dot. Yeah, that's true. But I mean, it is one of those things where if people are getting a bunch of strikeouts from sweepers, like this could be a way to counteract that. I don't know. I'm okay with that. I mean, it's what is it? It's you're drawing a line on a ball. It's not not saying that batters could no longer tell pitchers where to throw the ball. Like it's on the scale of 1 to 10, putting a dot on the ball is, I feel like, almost a 1.
Yeah.
And I know because it boosts offense. It's not something that was entirely popular with Trevor from like, hey, I'm a pitcher. This sucks. But the disengagement rules and the bigger bags and the things that increase steals, I think are huge wins for baseball because it created some strategic benefits to running more and being more athletic.
Different ways to win, right?
Different ways to win, right? And yes, I think that's really important because one other kind of shift we've noticed in recent years is the value of slugging over OBP, right? Coming out of the Moneyball era, relevant again, because Eno is going to introduce Moneyball.
I'm going to talk about this.
But like slugging sort of replaced OBP in terms of what you're optimizing for now. Like that's sort of a prevalent belief. Makes sense. Damage is very important. I think there's still other wrinkles that we're seeing. Like the speed aspect beyond stolen bases is going to be really interesting. Which teams are most aggressively taking extra bases, first, third, different things like that. And then there's still defensive things you can do, even with shift restrictions. You can still set your defense the way you want, right? And I think we see pretty big differences in how much teams like to shade. This is a really big table that looks kind of small on YouTube. You can check it out at Baseball Savant if you want to see just the full scope of the leaderboard. But, you pulled this up just looking for the teams that shade the most often versus the teams that shade the least often. And it's not like there's this consensus on how to play defense in the big leagues. There's nothing close to that right now.
This is what I like about this. It doesn't have, is the top of the list is not just the best teams in baseball. You're like, oh yeah, the Yankees and Dodgers are at the top and the Rockies are at the bottom. It's actually, no, there are different approaches. The teams that have shaded the most are the Rays, Angels, Blue Jays, Astros, and Mariners, Rangers, Twins, okay, there's some good teams and bad teams in there. The teams that have shaded the least are not the dum-dums, not all of them. I mean, the Phillies and Brewers have shaded the least in baseball, and you got the Pirates, Giants, Nationals, Royals, and Cubs down there. So there's a real difference. Here's another way of looking at it. There's a picture of the Rays positioning as a team and the Phillies. The Phillies position the least. Where you'll see the most is the Rays third baseman. If you can look at the Rays third baseman, he plays in 4 or 5 different really distinct spots. The Phillies third baseman plays in 1, maybe 2. The Rays first baseman plays like all over the bag there. And the Phillies first baseman plays in 1 place. And so if you look at the outfield dots, the Rays outfield dots are just like bigger. Like they just take more steps in each direction than the Phillies. So this is a real difference. And I think it may have something to do with pitching. You know, the Phillies found that their pitchers during shifts would actually pitch differently when the shift was on. So maybe by shifting less, they're putting more an emphasis on getting good defenders who are actually, and that's something they've been trying to improve, is, you know, getting Brandon Marsh and getting Johan Rojas into center field, and, you know, some of the, you know, getting Kyle Schwarber off the field. Some of this was about, you know, just improving the personnel. Whereas the Rays go get Christian Morel, who doesn't have a home, and they have Jonathan Aranda, and they have Brandon Lau. They have guys who aren't great defenders, and they try to position them as well as possible to do well with them. So, you know, even though shifting is dead, shifting is still alive, and I think there's an edge to be had in how you build your defense, and that still exists today.
I agree.
Yeah. I like that a lot, especially on that first chart. Again, I mean, I think about the Brewers a lot. I watch them a ton because they always seem like they have 3 center fielders on the field when Yelich isn't out there. You know, like
they've really prioritized personnel, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
Turang,
a phenomenal defender at second that could play short. Joey Ortiz, a third baseman that could play short. I think when you have guys that are that rangy, who have great arms, that much athleticism, you don't have to move them as much. You can play it a little more straight up. You don't have to take those gambles. It's almost a gamble to shade, right? You have data, you have reason to do it, so you take those shots as best you can. But I think ideally, if the guys can also hit well enough to be good players on the other side, I think you'd rather have players that are so athletic that you don't have to shade them that much. Because it's the ideal anyway, if there is an ideal. But I like that there's different ways to do it. I like that we had good teams and bad teams on both ends of that list. So I think as far as the solvability of baseball, I don't think baseball has quite the extreme problem like basketball.
I do think slugging is a bit of a problem. And I just think that the slugging surpassing OBP means that, like, here's the way of thinking about it. The Braves, when they had their quote unquote dynasty, their up the middle for a lot of the time was Rafael Belliard and Mark Lemke. And Rafael Belliard one year had a WRC plus. I need to get this. I can't just guess.
It was in the 60s, wasn't it? The 60s.
I mean, that was his career. But one year he had a WRC plus of 5. Another year he had a WRC plus of -7. But even when he was the starter for the Atlanta Braves in 1992, did they win it all in 1992? I think they did. Is that the year? Anyway, it was not that year.
They didn't win
91 maybe. Anyway, 91 he had a 61 WRC plus, and 92 he had a 33, and mostly because his ISOs started with a .03. Like he hit 2 homers for his whole career. And that was old school baseball, and you're like, no, he's a defender, and he can run, and you know, like now, because slugging is so tightly related to success, every team wants to slug everywhere. And maybe the Brewers are tweaking that a little bit. Maybe the Guardians are tweaking that a little bit, you know, but there's a little bit of a problem there. And so I'm receptive to pushing the fences out, deadening the ball, you know. There's always a little push and pull where you can change little things and make the game better, I think.
I hope we see a little more action on the long term, the rule changes by decade. I hope we see a few more bars like we're seeing in this decade, because I think that's better for the long term health of the game. Even though people are going to get mad and fight about it, that's pretty much a guarantee anytime you have rules changes. But We're gonna make our way out. It's been a great hour hanging with you guys. You got all of us are on Blue Sky. You can find Trevor. I am Trevor May. @BScott@social. Saris.bscott@social. I'm DVR.bscott@social. You can join our Discord with the link in the show description. We'll get the graphics from this show up in there. That hoops one, as I mentioned before, it is fascinating. Thanks to Brian Smith for producing this episode for us today. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.